Okay.
Have you ever been so angry that you turned into a wolf and burnt down the economic system?
Oh, we'll get there, baby. We'll get there.
I feel like we're right there right now.
I will just say, for those of you who are joining us, when I'm talking about the themes of Werewolf, you're going to be like, "Damn, this is too real." I feel this so hard right now. Let's do it. Let's get started.
All right.
I was trying to count, and then on the screen, my fingers were including each other. So, like, why are they going down?
Your fingers also completely out of frame for me, so I just see your thumb drift into frame periodically.
Lord.
Bloop, 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 bloop.
This is again. I feel the need to remind people this is a professional podcast that we're doing.
I can't count my fingies.
Randall just saw his fingers and forgot how to count for a second. Even though he's a programmer and that's kind of his only job.
You only have to count to 1 in programming. 1, 0. That's it.
I don't get to do that anymore anyway. I aged out. They don't give me a keyboard. Oh man, speaking of depressing anyway, okay. Welcome to this RPGBOT.How to Play. Tonight we're going to be talking about Werewolf. I am Reynold James, and with me is Tyler Kamstra. Tyler, a woo.
A woo to you too, good sir.
Hi, also, Ash Eli.
It's terrible. That's how you werewolf.
What level are you? That was pretty good.
You can call me your kinseeker because that's what I'm about to do.
I don't know what that means, but I'm really excited to find out.
It'll make sense.
Yeah.
So yes, welcome everyone to Ash Teaches Tyler and Randall How to Play Werewolf the Apocalypse. If you were with us last year, you might remember that we did this with Vampire, so it's kind of apropos that we're doing this with Werewolf and Spooktober again. So, Werewolf the Apocalypse. How is it related to Vampire and how is it different? So the one thing that a caveat I want to get out of the way is while technically all of the World of Darkness games take place in the same shared universe, they're kind of also separated from each other because especially someone who's familiar with Vampire the Masquerade's lore, the stuff I'm going to talk about is going to feel like it's extremely contradictory to the cosmology and lore of Vampire. And that's kind of just by design. They're supposed to be standalone projects. Is why you don't, as much as I would like it, you can't really have an old World of Darkness game where one player's a werewolf, one's a vampire, and one's a hunter. First off, the power curvature level is just wildly out of whack in such a game, and it just doesn't work from a lore perspective either. So even though in Werewolf vampires do exist and the ones you'll be fighting are similar to Kindred in Vampire the Masquerade, they're not one-for-one Kindred. Same with Hunter, same with Vampire, and all of that stuff. So, welcome to the Apocalypse. It is called Werewolf the Apocalypse for a reason. Yeah. So the first thing you need to know is...
Okay.
Yeah, no. I'm also talking about what's happening in the game. Okay. So, the bad guys won. That's what happened.
That's how we start?
That's how we start. The bad guys won. Your ancestors had the possibility of preventing the apocalypse, but they failed. They failed hard. And now it's not a question of you preventing the apocalypse because the apocalypse is already in progress. It is you trying to limit the amount of damage or save whoever you can so that it becomes an end of the world as we know it or an end of civilization, but not a complete cessation of existence. So
people are going to be listening to this podcast like 10 years in the future, I hope. And they're like, again, is he talking about Werewolf the Apocalypse or is he talking about this particular point in time in 2024?
That's the thing is a lot of this is going to feel like too real is what I said, because even though it takes place in modern nights, the thing that's causing the apocalypse is what else? Human nature, human greed. There is corruption, there is exploitation, there is decadence and selfishness on a level that is unprecedented, and that is the apocalypse. It's the slow degradation of the natural order and the slow death knell of humanity and everybody who likes to call the Earth home, essentially.
That's us.
Yeah. So just so we're clear, Werewolf the Apocalypse is not a happy-go-lucky game, which is kind of par for the course with World of Darkness games. They're all extremely cynical. Whereas with Vampire, the personal struggle and horror comes with you being a monster and trying to reconcile your place and walk that fine line between human and monster. With Werewolf, it's coming to terms with the fact that the fights that you are trying to fight and win are just battles in a war you've already lost, are destined to lose, and there's no way out of it. So it's about holding on to what sort of idealism you have in the face of utter nihilism. Hooray!
Okay,
also eco-terrorism.
Yeah, okay.
Just sprinkled in, like just a little bit of spice. Just
a little bit, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't want to get too far ahead. I do want to ask a quick question. Is there like a group of werewolves that are totally like, nah, I think we could win this, that everybody thinks is stupid? Because I want to be part of that, whatever that is.
There are, but the Werewolf Society kind of thinks that they are naive at best, or just they look at them with pity. And
okay, that's enough. I'm excited.
The optimists who tried to do that and think that they can still win, there's consequences for that outlook. I will just say we'll get to that later. But let's just say optimism in this world is a short-lived experience.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the world, though, and the cosmology and how we got here and why it's all messed up. So, according to the cosmology, in the beginning there was nothing, and then there was Gaia, the Earth, and Gaia sort of created of herself 3 aspects of creation and the world. These 3 aspects were called the triad, with a T, not a D. I don't know why it's not triad, but it's triad. Whatever.
Crime or something, maybe? I don't know.
Cool factor, I guess. But so the 3 different aspects are the wild, spelled with a Y, a WY. So the wild, which is the aspect of chaos, change, and creation. The weaver, which is the aspect of stasis and order. And the worm, which is the aspect of corruption, destruction, and entropy. So you can kind of it's kind of similar to the Hindu perspective of like Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahman, the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer. So it's very similar. But it's ambiguous as to whether these are actually personified beings or just aspects of Gaia, metaphysical aspects, or like great spirits. So in an ideal world, and how it used to work when the world was new, was these 3 aspects were fundamentally in balance. Because, you need the wild to create change. For when things get too stagnant, you need the weaver to keep things relatively stable, and you need the worm to destroy things to create way for new things. The problem is when 1 or 2 of these gets out of balance, and that's what's happening, and that's what caused the apocalypse. Specifically, the weaver and the worm grew too powerful, and the wild is slowly dying. The worm is the focus of most of the challenge in the game because the worm is such an overt presence in terms of its destruction, its entropy, its corruption. The weaver is hard to fight against because the cities are the domain of the weaver. Cities, civilization, that is the strongest aspect of the weaver, and it's hard to kind of fight against civilization itself. So the weaver, basically the werewolves have said, the weaver's won. We can't really do anything about that. All we can do is try to mitigate the worm. So in the midst of all of this, who are the werewolves and how do they relate to all of this? So the werewolves or true werewolves, because there are different kinds, but the true werewolves in the focus of Werewolf the Apocalypse call themselves the Garu. Now I'm not sure exactly if I'm pronouncing that right. Some people say Garu, or I think those are the only 2. I was going to
Garu.
Garu, yeah. I've heard it most pronounced Garu, so that's what I'm going with. And they come together in a series of tribes called the Garu Nation. And the Garu are servants of Gaia. Gaia created them in the beginning to be stewards of the triad and protect the realm of spirits and the wild and all of that stuff. Not the wild as in the uppercase wild, but as in like wilderness and stuff like that. So they were gifted by Gaia to ensure that this sort of came about. But the werewolves in ancient times messed up. What they did, when humanity was first starting civilization, the werewolves were adamantly opposed to it. because they saw it as a advancement of the Weaver. And so they started a systemic purge of humanity called the Imperregnum, I think it is. But it was essentially where the werewolves basically preyed upon humanity for centuries. They killed them without any restraint. Some of them took delight in it, and it was just systemic purges of humanity. And eventually people realized, hey, this isn't good. This is not a good idea. And by doing that, we're actively feeding the worm. So we need to stop doing that. But by the time they realized it, it was too late. The worm had already gained too much power, and the werewolves have kind of made their own. And it's why... Go ahead.
So I want to ask, because you did say, like, it isn't clear whether there's an instantiation, like, can I talk to Gaia? Can I talk to the worm or the wild? So I want to clarify here. When we say that the worm had gained too much power, as in there is a will and that will has gained too much power, or is it just more nature is out of balance because there's too much destruction and there's so much destruction that we could never rebalance it again?
It's kind of a little column A, a little column B. I mean, okay. They did unbalance nature, but also the worm is kind of a presence. It's unclear if it has a consciousness, but it certainly has servants. And those servants were empowered by the actions of the Garu in ancient times. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and like the follow-up to that is when you say that it has servants, kind of like the werewolves are the servants of Gaia, but I'm assuming Gaia is not directly talking to them. So
no.
They're just interpreting what, their forefathers told them as a society and hoping they're doing the right things and keeping things in balance. Like, is it similar that the servants of the worm or the servants of the Weaver also might think they understand some will or some greater thing, but they're actually really manifesting their own beliefs?
It's unclear. The Garu talk about the worm as if it has a will, but who's to know if that's true or not? Like, it's left pretty pointedly ambiguous.
No, I mean, that's cool. Okay, just understanding that helps me get the flavor of, like, both as a player, how to think about it. Because you can, like, it's actually kind of interesting. As a player, you might have the belief that none of these entities exist, but you could still role play as a werewolf in absolutely believing these entities exist and have a will. It's neat.
At the end of the day, the worm is just it's a way to label something that you're fighting against, essentially. And that's why it's like, the worm isn't like this nefarious villain that we can go fight. It's just the concept of entropy, essentially, is what it is. Personified. Not really personified even then. It's like a vague conscious will, essentially. But, the worm in and of itself, as said before, isn't inherently a malevolent force. It only becomes malevolent when it's given too much power. That's kind of a trend with spirits in general, is that it's very easy for spirits to become twisted by the nature of the place where they're at or the people they interact with. They're like personified emotion in a sense. But yeah, so that the whole purge happened, and it's why werewolves are able to operate in modern nights without, people being like, hey, there's werewolves around. Because when a werewolf displays their true nature to mortals, the primal fear that is buried deep within the minds of all humans from a time when werewolves hunted them turns on and causes what is called the delirium, which causes a person to go into a complete shutdown, mental shutdown, fight or flight mode. They can't process what is happening, sort of thing. So either they forget what they saw, like they remember they saw something incredibly scary, but they can't really figure out what it was that they saw, like they blacked out, or they try to rationalize what they saw. Sort of like if you saw a werewolf rip your friend in half, you would sort of like, your mind would play a trick on you to say, oh, that wasn't a werewolf, it was a pack of dogs that ripped him apart. Jeez. That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Now, so this is complicated by the fact that, technology exists, and mortals who view werewolves through video feed and stuff like that aren't subject to delirium. So werewolves still have to be careful to keep the veil up. So the vampires have the masquerade, the werewolves call it the veil, because, they're fighting a losing battle here. And the agents of the Weaver and the Worm are humanity. Humanity is, for all intents and purposes, working for the enemy. And if the enemy finds out what you're up to, that's it. You're dead. So
it's like, so we screwed up by eating all of these humans, but here we are 3,000 years later looking at the humans being like, there for the enemy. Maybe we should have eaten like 6 more.
Yeah.
All right, so it feels like the werewolves really are in an impossible situation. It's like, if they don't eat the humans, then the Weaver wins. If they eat the humans, the worm wins. How do is the wild just sitting on the sidelines like, meh?
The wild has no power right now anymore. The wild is connected mostly to the wilderness, and it is mostly kept alive by kind of the werewolves. But for all intents and purposes, the Garu consider the wild a non-entity at this point. Like, it's not worthy of discussion. The only realm that it has connection to is like the untouched spirit realm. That's about it. But the Garu wouldn't say that they're fighting for the wild. They fight for Gaia. They don't serve any of the triad. They serve Gaia. And Gaia wants her 3 children to be in harmony with each other. So
well, I can tell you kind of like the triad they let down.
Well, they let down everybody. That's the ultimate tragedy of being a Garu, is that you have to come to terms with the fact that the world is ending, and it's partially you and your people's fault. You let everybody down. You let humans down. You let the Weaver down. You let the worm down, and you let the wild down. And perhaps most tragically, you let Gaia down. So yeah, kind of sucks. So
yeah,
the other thing that werewolves are charged with, or the Garu are charged with, are protecting the spirit world, which is called Umbra. It's kind of a reflection of our world. We'll get to the Umbra in a second. And what are called cairns, which are these places that have this close connection with spiritual energy. So they can be anything. And this is like when people are like, oh, there's like some wild magnetism of this location. Like when people come up with those conspiracy theories about ancient aliens with Stonehenge. Stonehenge is absolutely a cairn.
Okay.
But they can also be in cities as well. Like there are cairns like within a penthouse that a pack protects. And yeah, usually these cairns are protected by what's called a sept. So there's packs and there's septs. Packs are like what are player parties is basically what they are. And then septs are a group of these packs coming together to protect this cairn location.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So werewolves, pretty cool, right?
Yeah. Okay. A couple questions about being a werewolf, and I know we're going to dive a little bit deeper. Like, how long does one live?
Normal human lifespan.
Okay, cool. All right. So there's nobody telling me like what happened 3,000 years ago with like a long gray wolf beard. Okay,
no.
Awesome.
They are not immortal. You have a normal mortal existence. So you may be asking, this sounds pretty cool, I guess, without all the nihilism, but hey, fangs and stuff and claws, that sounds cool. Where do I sign up? How do I become a werewolf? Well, you can't. I mean, you technically can. There are lycanthropes in the world, but they are a different type of were-creature, and the Garu hate them. They're called stolen moons, is what they call them. And they do, in fact, affect people with this curse. Nobody knows exactly where the curse comes from. People usually speculate that like some mages in the past tried to steal a Garu's power, and that transformed into a curse by Gaia that was then spread as a disease. So yeah, Garu don't like those types of were creatures. So if you want to be a capital W werewolf in service of Gaia, you have to be born as one. So no one knows exactly why someone is chosen to be Garu, what factors into it. It does seem to be hereditary. So like if your parents are both have werewolf in their family tree, you'll probably be a werewolf as well. That being said, werewolves are very, very, very adamant about werewolves not breeding with other werewolves. It's less of an issue in 5th edition, but in past editions, how you were born became a big sticking point. If you were born from a union between 2 werewolves, you were called something called a metis, which were very bigoted against metis people, and you're basically outcast from Garu society. There's still some of that in 5th edition, but I think they pulled that back a little bit because it was leaning into the problematic territory. But yeah.
Okay, so just to be clear, it isn't that there's like a society of werewolves and a society of people. You're a werewolf. You may be born from 2 perfectly like human parents, or 1 human parent, or maybe your grandfather was a werewolf and nobody wanted to talk about it. Like we're in the Teen Wolf situation at this point, I guess. But like we're intermingled. And so if we go all the way back to like the rise of humanity, the werewolves existed at that time, but it wasn't like warring tribes. It was like literally the people of the society, some of them we're werewolves and we're rebelling against society.
Yeah, but here's the other thing. So werewolves wouldn't count themselves as human because they're not really. They're
But born of human, potentially.
That is one way. So the other way that you can become a werewolf is you're born from a wolf. So if you're a wolf that's born to wolf parents, it's not like you're a human born from a wolf. No, you're just a wolf that can turn into a human. So it can go the other way. So that's why werewolves don't really consider themselves human or wolf. They're kind of in between because, I mean, yeah, there was implication of bestiality in some respects back then. We don't talk about that, but no, it specifically is like if a wolf is a werewolf can be born from two wolf parents.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, but yeah, and it's kind of it's a weird adjustment because a wolf has to come to terms with what it means to be partly human, and a human has to come to terms with what it means to be partly wolf because you're going to be probably mingling between both groups. Human-born werewolves spend as much time with like fully blooded wolves as wolves do with fully blooded humans. So it's a weird, huh?
So like none, basically?
No. I mean, I'm saying they do spend a lot of time with both of those because as a human-born werewolf, you can turn into a wolf, like just a full wolf, and you can communicate with other wolves. But it takes some adjustment because it's a language that you have to learn. And wolf-born werewolves can learn to be integrated into human society. They also have to learn language of humans. So that's why they don't really consider themselves humans or wolves because they very much are a child of two very different worlds. So yeah, that's how a Garu werewolf is made. It doesn't happen right away. It's not like you come out in werewolf form and just be like, oh, okay. No, it's nebulous as to when your true nature comes out. Sometimes it can happen before puberty, but it's very rare. It usually happens sometime after puberty, but it can be like as late as like in your 30s. But essentially,
there's still time.
Yeah, but essentially, you come into knowledge of your nature through a traumatic event called the first change, which is basically what it sounds like. You suddenly, the full moon's happening, you turn into a werewolf, and you probably hurt or kill anybody who's around you in a very traumatic way.
Wait, the moon matters for this?
It does, yeah. The moon does matter.
Yes.
Not in terms of like the moon triggers your transformation. It does. It can trigger your first transformation, but werewolves have complete control over their shapeshifting. But what moon you're born under determines certain aspects of your character, which we'll get to later.
Interesting.
All right, sounds good.
But yeah, it's it is kind of like puberty on steroids, or like a woman's first period. There's a lot of blood, a lot of screaming, and probably someone's going to get hurt. There are very few non-traumatic first changes. Sometimes a werewolf gets lucky and there's no one around them. They go through their first change. They wake up the next morning not realizing what happened. But probably you're going to kill someone close to you and you're probably going to eat them. So pretty traumatic change. There are Garu called kin seekers, is what they're called, who go out to try to find these young budding Garu, like observing signs and who they think is possibly a Garu, so they can welcome them into society and sort of teach them how to be a werewolf so that they don't, hurt people.
Or when you say they're looking for signs, like, is it possible to detect before the first change? Or are they looking for evidence the first change has happened once? Like
it is
all over the exterior of the house. It
is possible to find someone before the first change. Like the best way to do it is to like look at a person's family tree. Be like, well, this person's a werewolf. This person's a werewolf. There's a very good chance that this person's going to be a werewolf. So we should probably keep an eye on them. But usually they follow signs of a person after the first change because it's more obvious. But there are kin seekers, though, that they will hone in on a Garu that hasn't gone under the first change, and they will do whatever they can in their power to trigger that change, which some Garu are like, this is kind of morally reprehensible, but okay. But yeah, they'll go out of their way, like they'll try to, hurt them, or like sometimes they'll beat a Garu with a budding Garu within an inch of their life to trigger the transformation as a form of like, self-preservation. Or they might murder one of their close friends and family to piss them off. So pretty morally suspect. But the excuse these sorts of kin seekers say is, look, we're in the middle of a battle for survival here. We need every foot soldier we can get. Now is not the time for moral compunctions, okay? We have to, we need those foot soldiers.
Was it 3,000 years ago when you were destroying all the people? Was that the time to have the morals?
Have you learned nothing from humanity? That humans and, by extension, werewolves have very short memories and don't really learn their lesson all that well.
It didn't work last time, just straight down the memory hole, gone forever.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I'm not saying all Ken Seekers are like that. There are some, and most Garu would be like, "That's not cool. Let's not do that."
Okay, that's good. At least, at least they're the outsiders.
Yeah.
Are there any Ken Seekers that just follow wolf packs around? Like, oh, maybe this one.
Yeah, but usually they're wolves. Like they're wolf-born. Or they shift into a wolf to follow the pack. Okay. It's not just like this creepy human that's following this wolf.
Zoologists. They call them zoologists, Ash.
Oh yeah, there you go. Okay, fair enough. Apologies to any zoologists out there. I was not.
Or you're awesome. Either way.
Yeah. But yeah, that's basically how to become a Garu. Welcome to the apocalypse. Welcome to the war. Now get in there, soldier. We got fighting to do. Now, that's how to become a werewolf. But there's also Garu society, which is just as complicated. Remember how much the clans kind of had these competing political ideologies in Vampire and how they were kind of fighting against each other?
Yeah.
That's also in werewolf society too. They're all followers of Gaia, but all of them have a different perspective on what serving Gaia means. And usually they are at each other's throats just as much as they are against the worms. So it's like we have a common enemy, but we also kind of don't really like each other.
I mean, to ask the question, so mechanically, is this meant to provide the same thing that in a lot of other games we get through a race or an ancestry?
Yeah. So yeah. Whereas in Vampire, your clan was both your race and your class. Werewolf the Apocalypse actually does have classes, which we'll get to in a second. But so the tribes are more of your race or background, because you're not born into a tribe like you are a clan in Vampire. You're introduced to the Garu society, and then you get to pick a clan, pick a tribe, the one that matches your instinct, like your ideology. So tribes welcome new Garu, no matter who you are, as long as you match up with their ideologies. I mean, there are some bigoted tribes who are just like, you have to be born of our tribe to be part of our tribe, but they're a minority. So let's go over the tribes, because there's a lot of them. There's 11 tribes, whereas in the Vampire book, there were only 9 clans at the start. So there's 11 in here. So the first is the Black Furies. In previous editions, they were an all-female tribe. They got rid of that. The Black Furies are now just vigilantes and justice seekers. If you remember from Vampire, they're kind of closely similar to the Bruja clan from Vampire, punk rockers, counterculture guys, that kind of stuff. Then we have the Bone Gnawers, who are usually like to live on the fringes of society, like beggars or counterculture people, just like outsiders generally. And they have a closer relationship with humans and tend to live in cities more than the other tribes. And each tribe has a patron spirit that gives them a favor and a ban, which is similar to like the flaws and stuff from Vampire. So like, for instance, for a Black Fury, you get like certain benefits for like providing justice for people. And you get a ban where you can ignore an injustice or you get some penalties. So there's stuff like that. So the Black Furies... go ahead.
It's like edicts and anathemas in PFC.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. It's like edicts and anathemas. But you get mechanical benefits for following your edict, and you get mechanical penalties for going against your ban.
Makes sense.
So Black Fury's spirit is the Gorgon, which is essentially like a big bull, which is what the Gorgon was originally. It's not the Medusa.
Not the Medusa.
Sisters. No. So the Bone Gnawers, can you guess what their spirit is?
Bones? Is it a spooky, scary skeleton?
No,
I would have guessed dog if I wasn't staring at the...
You'd think, but no, it's a rat. It's rat.
Oh, okay.
Which makes sense. So then we have the Children of Gaia, which I believed used to be called the Fianna, who were very steeped in Irish mythology. They tend to be like sages and stewards. They have kind of like fae folk vibe to them, very connected to the wilderness and Umbra, and have a close connection with the spirits. Their patron spirit is the unicorn. Then we have Gale Stalkers, who were previously known as Wendigo, but I think they thought that was too appropriative, so they changed it.
Makes sense.
So Gale Stalkers are survivalists, hunters. They tend to, work in like northern Canada and stuff like that, in cold areas. There are also a lot of First Nations people in that tribe. Their patron spirit is North Wind. Then we have the Glasswalkers, which, as the name implies, they are probably the closest to humanity. They kind of value cities and technology and use the elements of the Weaver to sort of influence how they fight against the worm. They're not exactly very popular among the Garu Nation for that specific reason, but they see as what they do as necessary. And I'm sure Tyler's going to like this, their patron spirit is Spider.
I thought they were going to be cool. I thought this was going to be my people. Like, yeah, I'm the werewolf who also does computers sometimes.
Well, Spider's benevolent. The reason it's Spider is because she has this interconnected web, which is, the internet.
Is it worldwide?
It is a worldwide internet, yes. And yeah, I'm sorry, Tyler. The Glasswalkers are cool otherwise, but yeah, I saw that. I was like, that's not the one that Tyler's going to pick.
It was right up until the end.
Yeah, until you had me. I was almost there. We were this close to greatness.
I'm sorry. If it matters, you don't interact with your patron spirit all that much. They're just kind of there.
He won't.
Creatives, the caretakers, the storytellers, the pumpkin spice latte, sporting hipsters. That's the Heartwardens. They're all about hospitality. Did I put Heartwalkers?
The Ghost Council. Yeah, in the second entry you had Heartwalkers. What about the Ghost Council?
Oh, I skipped the Ghost Council. You're right. So the Ghost Council are very interesting. They tend to be witches, detectives, investigators. They're all about like finding puzzles and figuring them out, or like shamanistic hedge witches, that kind of stuff. Like if you go to see a witch doctor in the Deep South, chances are they're probably a Garu, and they're part of this tribe, the Ghost Council. Their patron spirit is the Horned Serpent. So yeah, the Heartwardens we talked about. Their patron spirit is Stag. Then we have the Red Talons. Now they softened the Red Talons a lot in this edition. In the previous edition, the Red Talons were almost exclusively wolf-born werewolves. And they were extremely radical because they thought that all humans, including human-born Garu, needed to be exterminated. Yeah, they were often the villains in a lot of stories because they hated humans so much. So they softened them a lot because they're like, why do we have a tribe that players can join that's just diametrically opposed to most of the other party? So the Red Talons aren't that anymore. Red Talons they're still like, they're brute muscle fighters and people who really relish in combat and, conflict and that kind of stuff, but they're not, genocidal maniacs. So there's that.
That's nice.
The Red Talons patron is the Griffin. Then we have the Shadow Lords. The Shadow Lords, now with the Red Talons soften, are probably the most morally reprehensible of the group. They are a very much like might makes right, we prey on weaklings sort of thing. Very Klingon-y is what I would say. They tend to be in the past, they were coded heavily towards like Slavic and Eastern European, but they got rid of that. So the Shadow Lords, with a name like the Shadow Lords, you gotta think that they're not the greatest guys. Their patron spirit is Thunder. Then we have the Silent Striders, which I really like. They're ambassadors, wanderers, nomads. They just kind of go here and there wherever they want. And they're big on, learning new things about new topics, learning new things from other people. They're the most open and approachable of all of the tribes. So their spirit is Owl. And then we have the Silver Fangs, which would be kind of like the Ventru of Garu society. They're the self-styled werewolf aristocracy, and they claim to be its leaders. Whether people agree with that is kind of up to debate. Most people kind of are like, yeah, they're kind of the leaders of the Garu Nation. The only people who really dispute that are the Shadow Lords, who are like, no, absolutely not. The Shadow Lords and the Silver Fangs freaking hate each other, almost more than they hate the worm. But they're very
really edgy enough.
Yeah, the Silver Fangs are like kind of the goody two-shoes white knights. They're all about honor and integrity and that kind of stuff. And their patron spirit is Falcon. And those are the 11 tribes. Now, there are other tribes, 2 of which were previously a part of the Garu Nation, but are no longer a part of it. But we first have to talk about the other tribe in the room, which is the Black Spiral Dancers. The Black Spiral Dancers are a group of werewolves that have never been part of the Garu Nation because they think the worm is the bee's knees and that they should do whatever they can to increase its sway and its influence so that it can completely erase existence and people can just start over. That's basically what they want. Yeah, they're a little crazy. And they oppose Gaia. So if you're not fighting against the worm's direct servants, you're probably fighting against the Black Spiral Dancer.
Okay, are they playable?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, got it.
The three that I'm mentioning now are not playable. They are just mentioned as other tribes that exist. Then we have the Cult of Fenris. They were previously playable in the previous versions. They were called the Get of Fenris. Now they're called the Cult of Fenris. They were a little bit controversial because they were very Nordic inspired sort of culture, but with at least a few subsects that were neo-Nazis. So that wasn't great.
No.
Yeah. So that's why they decided not to keep them. It was a change that people thought was not, that people complained about, because the thing about the Cult of Fenris, they had a close relationship with Nazis in World War II. Like, that was part of their history. But the larger cult, the larger Get of Fenris in the older editions realized the error of their ways. They're like, we got to get rid of this influence in our tribe, and went on like an extermination campaign of anybody who still ascribed to this ideology. So people were like, they redeemed themselves. But, I get why they did it. It was still a controversial change. So the Cult of Fenris is now not part of the Garu anymore. They're now completely just neo-Nazi coded, essentially. They're just bad guys. They're just bad guys that you can not feel guilty about killing.
Is it? Yeah. Which brand of bad are they? Like, what are they going for? Is it like a purity thing of like, only us, we are the best werewolves and all other werewolves suck?
Kind of. But so the thing about it, and we'll get to this in a little while when we talk about mechanics, there are two states that can signal like the either expulsion of a person from the Garu Nation or just a voluntary leaving of it. And that is Harano and Hagalosk. Harano is just submitting to a state of complete nihilism and saying, what's the point of fighting this losing war? And then the other side of that is Hagalosk, Hagalosk, I think it is, which is where you get so angry and frustrated with the state of the world and why it isn't being fixed that you're just like, screw it. I'm just going to commit war crimes to accomplish things. And that's basically what happened to the Cult of Fenris. They basically all submitted to Hagalosk and said, screw Gaia, screw the Garu Nation. We know what's best to fix the problems, and we're just going to go on a killing spree. That's essentially what they did. And then on the flip side of that,
this wasn't the party.
I said it was. Yeah, it is in the party.
This sounds like my party.
A little.
Oh God.
A little.
Then we have
a little small.
Lastly, we have the Stargazers. The Stargazers were also playable. They were called something different. I forget what. I think it was called Utena. I think that's what they were called. It was another Native American coded one, or I think it was Eastern Asian. I can't remember. But the Stargazers left the Garu Nation because the Garu Nation kind of fell apart due to recent events. Like, they're slowly bringing it back together, but the Stargazers like, look, man, the Garu Nation's dead. We think we can figure out how to fix Gaia on our own and maybe get away from all this fighting the worm nonsense and try to find more peaceful ecumenical ways of solving the crisis, or at least lessening the pain. So that's the Stargazers. They're also not playable, sadly, which I think everybody was also upset about because the Stargazers are really cool. But yeah, sadly not. So those are the tribes. Then let's talk about the spirit world, also called Umbra. So the spirit world is kind of similar to the Shadow, like a combination of the Shadowfell and the Feywild. So it's kind of like a reflection of our world, but in a very more abstract than the Feywild would be. So in areas where, things are pure, which are very few and far between in the world right now. So when you find those, it's notable. So in the Umbra, it's kind of, lush and beautiful and all of that stuff. In places where the worm holds more sway, or the Weaver does, it becomes a very dark and twisted reflection. And some of the examples they give is like in like a cobalt mine that is set up on the real world. If you were to go into the Umbra reflection of that, it would look like a deep scar on the surface of the world. And then another example is if there's like a shipwrecked oil tanker on a shore in the real world, in the Umbra, the dark reflection of that would be a spear in the side of Gaia with like blood and pus just leaking out of it. So again, very eco-coded sort of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so help me understand, like, is it also like the Feywild or the Shadowfell, and like I might just stumble into it, or as a werewolf do I have the power to just be like, I want to see what the Umbra looks like here? Humans
have a very hard time going into the Umbra. I don't think it's impossible, but it's really hard. Werewolves can. Several rights that you can pick, I think, allow you to briefly go into the Umbra, and Cairns are the main way you go into the Umbra because they're where the font of spiritual energy is the strongest. But yeah, as a werewolf, you might be called to go into the Umbra on more than one occasion because you can, if you're investigating a scene and trying to solve, because a lot of the Chronicles in Werewolf is solving mysteries. And so because usually the worm works subtly, and so you're trying to figure out where the worm's influence is, and you have to do that through investigation in the real world and in the Umbra, because the Umbra will give you clues that you can't find in the real world.
Okay, so that makes sense. Like, if I go into the Umbra, again, is it similar to Feywild that, like, my body is in the Umbra, I am absent from the real world or the material plane, whatever you want to call it? Or do I like manifest in both places simultaneously?
I didn't read enough about this to be sure, but I think your body stays in the real world when you go into the Umbra. But
so it's like seeing into the ethereal plane in D&D.
It's kind of like Avatar. The spirit world in Avatar is the best comparison I could probably make, where Aang like goes into the spirit world, but his body still is in the world. People can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's what it is. So we should also talk briefly about the spirits. So in addition to the patron spirits, there's also just regular spirits. They can communicate stuff to werewolves, but they don't like communicate in the way that we're accustomed to. It's more just like emotions and feelings. But the spirits that are corrupted by the worm become what are called banes. And banes exert they're the main servants of the worm. And banes exert their influence by either whispering sweet nothings into susceptible humans, or just full on possessing them. Sometimes they have their own agenda, but usually their agenda is just spread corruption, spread entropy, that kind of stuff. The Bane, if you're not fighting Black Spiral Dancers, you're going to be fighting against a human that is either corrupted by or just possessed by a Bane. And yeah, that's now it's very clear, Werewolf is very clear about this, that when you're telling stories in Werewolf the Apocalypse, you shouldn't try to upplay the influence of Banes on humanity. Humanity got to the point where it is not because spirits told them to get to this point. They gave them the tools. They showed them the two doors that they could go down. But it was ultimately human nature and human decisions that got us to this point. So it's like, don't give humanity an easy out. It's like, oh, we could have been better if these spirits didn't possess us. Darn. No, that does happen. But we got here because bad humans made bad decisions.
It's like the entrapment rules. Like, you can only, like, you were likely going to do this anyway. I just kind of helped you along.
I just gave you a little push. Exactly. A little nudge.
That's all.
So that's the lore. That's the settings and themes. I know that was a lot. Delta, do humans know about the worm and the weaver? Some do, but most don't. Usually humans that have been influenced by a Bane are made aware of the worm and the weaver. But even then, most of them don't know that they're working for the worm or the weaver. They just think that this was my idea. That's like, they don't even know that if a spirit directly talks to them, they think it's their own thoughts that's influencing them, not necessarily some outer force that's influencing them. So again, it feeds into that idea that humans are shown a door, but it's their choice to walk through it.
Yeah.
And as they keep making more and more bad choices, the Bane's influence over them increases to the point where they can fully possess the human. So it's, again, the human's choices that got them there, not the Bane.
We need more bacon.
Delta, we are working from incomplete information, but the problem is that that's kind of how it's just supposed to work, is because if the humans knew about the nature of the worm, the weaver, and the wild, they would try to find ways to influence it for their own gain. At least that's the fear that Garu have. Like, yeah, maybe some people be like, oh, this is bad and we need to stop this. And that's why some humans, like some human allies of Garu, have been brought into the world to sort of help their werewolf brothers and sisters. But the fear is that just as many good people would sign up to sort of reduce the corruption of the worm, just as many people would sign up to be like, yeah, I'm going to use this to my advantage. Because if humans are anything, They are self-minded individuals, and that's how we got here. So even given the full information, it could make things better, but it just as equally could make things much, much worse. So let's talk about
werewolf mechanics.
Yeah, let's do it.
Work on those werewolf cars.
I mean, we can skip a lot here, though, which is great because if you listen to the Vampire the Masquerade quick start guide, it's essentially the same system. So go listen to that, and it basically translates 1-to-1 here. The attributes are the same, the skills are mostly the same. You still form a pool of D10s from at least 2 different skills or a combination of skills or attributes, and you roll them against a set number of successes. Same thing. The big difference here is, so in Vampire, we had what were called, if you guys remember, messy criticals and bestial failures. Those aren't in this because you're not a vampire. Instead, you have one mechanic which is called a brutal outcome. And this happens when you build up rage, which is the equivalent to hunger in Vampire, where you replace dice with as your rage goes up. If you ever roll if 2 of your rage dice in a pool show a 1 or a 2 on them, that becomes a brutal outcome. It usually results in an instant failure of whatever check you're trying to do, unless the check was to cause harm, because guess what you're going to be doing? You're going to be causing some harm. So it usually comes up with collateral damage. Harm. Yeah, so let's say you're trying to pick a lock, but your rage, you get two 2s on your rage dice. It sort of translates as you get frustrated that the lock isn't picking, and so you just go and rip the door off its hinges and throw it at someone.
Yeah. So technically, the lock is still intact. I broke the whole gate.
Yeah.
Also, I'm sorry about your face. It's a little smushed now.
Yeah. So werewolves have a lot of rage because they're fighting an unwinnable fight. So they're angry people. Yes.
I want to make sure that I remember the vampire system correctly. So if I look at my character sheet, I have a list of attributes, and these are going to feel comfortable to folks. Things like strength, dexterity. There's also new things like manipulation, composure. So these are my attributes. I have a huge list of skills. Like how many do I have here?
I think it's like 9
27
per. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I guess that's worth saying. Like, we'll get into character creation a little bit, so let's not dive too deep. But like you said, so when I go to do anything, I'm going to create a pool of dice. So let's say I have like 3 marks against my strength, and I have 3 marks against athletics. I get to roll 6 dice.
Correct.
And then we have the rage mechanic. I'm basically counting my rage.
Yeah.
And for every point of rage, I replace a die with a rage die.
Yeah, let's actually get into rage right now. So it works similar to how hunger works, where you have, although your tracker is smaller, I believe with vampire you had 5 boxes. In rage you have 4 boxes. So you use rage to fuel your powers, your transformations, your gifts as they're called, and also to regenerate when you're in supernatural forms. Similar to how the rouse check would work when you would try to summon powers of the blood in vampire, you would do a rage check, and you gain rage through several different ways. So you can howl at the moon, which you can only do once per night. Told you the moon would factor in. Yeah, you can howl at the moon. You can only do it once per night, though. Any provocation,
you've already done your one, then you're cut off.
Yeah, any provocation, physical harm, or humiliation will give you a rage point. And it has to be like a serious. This isn't like something you can gamify where like your friend insults you. It has to be something that cuts at your core. It's not like something that's just like a minor insult. It's like something that is like, what did you say? Do you want to go? Do you want to fight? That it's that kind of problem.
I don't think you met some of my friends.
Yeah.
It's like somebody brings their significant other there just so they could say that one thing that cuts to the core of them. They're like, oh.
Yeah, there you go. I need to get angry. Bring in Brad over here. Oh, that Brad.
Give me a second. I'm gonna call my boss. Just give me a minute.
But yeah, some players are probably already thinking, oh, physical harm must be easy because if I just am in combat, I'm getting rage all the time. No, actually, they called that out. Once combat starts, any physical harm you get during the combat does not give you rage because you're already angry. Yeah, you're already angry.
It would mechanically break the system.
It would mechanically break the system. And also, you would frenzy real quick. So kind of like with hunger, it's a balancing act with rage. You don't want to get too little or too much of it.
Delta has a gym in the chat. We can't skip without reading it. So optimize rage points by working customer service.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Ash, continue.
So if you overcap on rage, so if you get 5 rage, you go into frenzy. And frenzy works pretty much exactly how it works in Vampire. You lose control of your character for a minute or a scene, you do a lot of damage, and basically you can't come out of rage until everything around you is dead. Or you use willpower to try to come out of it. So don't go into frenzy, because it's not good. It's also just as bad if you lose all of your rage, because if you lose all your rage, you go into a state called losing the wolf, which essentially means you can't use any of your gifts, you can't transform, you're essentially just a normal human or a normal wolf. So you don't want to lose the wolf.
Okay, if you lose the wolf, like if I was born a wolf, do I become a wolf? And if I was born a human, I become a human? Or am I stuck in one of those forms and it's random?
No. You become a human or you become a wolf, whatever you were born as.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
Could you imagine just losing the wolf in the middle of a like you're born a wolf, you learn to be a werewolf, you integrate with human society, you just have a desk job, and one day you're just like, I'm very calm today. You lose the wolf, turn into a wolf in the middle of a cubicle farm, and you're like, well,
does that count as humiliation? Because if so,
yeah, that does count as that does count as humiliation. Yeah, so losing the wolf is not a permanent thing. You get it back as soon as you get a rage. So
good. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not permanent. But yeah, don't lose the wolf. Like if you lose the wolf in the middle of combat, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
Okay, and so for folks who are kind of following along and thinking about how this would work, there's a great benefit in having rage because we can spend the rage to do useful things. It's what fuels a lot of the skills we have as a character, but the higher my rage is currently, the more likely I'm going to trigger one of these brutal outcomes. And so It's a double-edged sword having that high rage count in any game.
Yeah, you want to be kind of in the middle. So it's kind of an elegant system because rage, it's a bright candle that burns very bright but goes out just as fast. So you got to be careful with how you use it. Now, before we get into how you use rage and some of the powers and stuff, let's talk about how Werewolf has kind of classes in this one. So remember I talked about tribes are kind of like your races or your ancestries.
Yeah.
So what moon you're born under determines your class, or what they're called is auspices. And it's also your role in Garu society. So if you're born under, there's 5 of them. So if you're born under a new moon, you are called a ragabash, which is essentially like a rogue. Like you stalk at night, you hunt, a rogue or a ranger. You stalk at night, you hunt people, you get like stealth stuff, that kind of thing. And whatever auspice you are gives you certain access to certain gifts. Like each auspice has exclusive lists of gifts. Then we have the Theurge, which is if you're born under a crescent moon. They're kind of the closest to mages. Like they're shamans, summoners, spirit talkers, that kind of stuff. They can, I believe one of their gifts allows them to summon like a spirit or something. So it's very cool. Then we have the Philodex, which if you're born under a half moon, you're a Philodex. And they're kind of like an investigator type of class or a judge. You solve mysteries, you solve crimes, that kind of stuff. Then we have the Galliard, which is born under a gibbous moon. They tend to be bards and storytellers or the face of the group. I can already tell Randall wants to go with Galliard.
I'm so stoked.
Then we have lastly we have the Arhoon, which are born under the full moon, and you're the wolfiest wolf that ever wolfed, which by that I mean you're a big warrior and fighter, that kind of thing. So pretty straightforward. But yeah, those are the auspices, pretty simple. Now, let's talk about werewolf forms, which I'm sure everybody's excited to hear about. So there's actually 5 different forms that you can take.
That's a lot. Okay.
Yeah. So
is it just a sliding scale from dude to wolf?
No, it's a sliding scale. It's a sliding scale from human to wolf is essentially like full human to full wolf. So the first form we have is called Hamid, which is you're just a human. You're a normal human guy. You don't get any special powers or abilities, but you also don't have to do rage checks to maintain this form. You're just in that. Then we have the Glabro, which is, you can think of the Glabro as kind of like the teen wolf. He's just like a very scraggly, hairy human. Maybe you have some elongated fingernails. You get, I think,
too much Rogaine on the forehead.
Yeah. you get some bonuses to your physical stats. I believe you get a claw attack as well.
Okay.
And you have some decent regeneration. Go ahead.
Okay. Do the Glabro look like ghouls from Call of Cthulhu?
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I
You
can't
remember
remember what they looked like. Yeah, kind of. I mean, I can show a picture of it in the Discord chat, which I'll look.
Okay,
But
sorry.
yeah, I mean, you basically just look like a raggedy human that's very hairy. That's essentially what it looks like. But you get some low grade regeneration. To maintain this form, you have to do a rage check every scene. One rage check, which is usually like a scene is a pretty nebulous amount of time. It's just whatever's happening is the scene. Then we have the apex of the forms, which is called the Krynos form, also called the war form. And it's what you'd think of when you think of werewolf, the bipedal, humanoid, jacked wolf man hybrid sort of thing. You get insane bonuses to your physical stats. I think it's like a +4 dice pool to all of your physical stats. You get a +3 damage bonus to your jaws and your claws, and you can regenerate very fast. Like, I think you can regenerate 2 health every turn, but it's also the most expensive. It requires 2 rage checks every scene. And if you go a turn, if the last turn ended without you killing someone, you have to make a rage check or you immediately frenzy. Yeah,
that is
the Krynos form is like, this is the form we're taking when it's like, talking is over, I'm going to kill everybody in this room. That's essentially what Krynos form is.
Well, okay, but like, can you opt out? Like, I think I've killed everyone I intend to kill. I would like to calmly go back to Glabro.
Yeah, no, as long as you pass your rage checks, you can go back. So, but like, again, so it's not like if you don't kill someone, you don't immediately go into frenzy. If you don't want to frenzy after because you didn't kill someone last turn, you can spend willpower to calm yourself.
Okay.
But again, willpower is a limited resource, so you have to be careful about how you spend it. So yeah, it's not just an all or nothing, but it's high risk, high reward. You get a lot of incredible bonuses being in the Krynos form, but you also get a lot of drawbacks. Then we have the Hispo form, which is like a dire wolf form. Like, you're just a very big, scary wolf. You don't get a claw attack in this form. You get a bite attack instead. You also still get some bonuses equal to the Glabro form for your physical. And same with the Glabro, you also get some mild regeneration. Same with Glabro, it only requires 1 rage check per scene to maintain, and there's no risk of frenzy. And then we have Lupus, which is you're just a full wolf. So that's it.
It was finally Lupus. Okay, it's exciting.
Yeah, Lupus is it Lupus? But so yeah, if you're not like fighting anything, you can pretty freely go between Hamid and Lupus form. It's not like you have to go through the whole spectrum to get to Lupus. You just be like, I want to be a wolf now so that I can, smell things better and track and stuff like that. So there's that. So werewolves will spend most of their time in either Hamid or Lupus form, depending on what the situation calls for.
Is there a limitation on when I can use language? Like, I'm assuming the Hamid and the Glabro can use human language.
The Hamid and the Glabro are the only ones who can use human language.
Okay. So I'm assuming Hispo and Lupus can use wolf language.
Yes.
Can a Krynos speak at all, or they only speak in murder?
They only speak in murder, essentially. Like, they only speak in roars and gutter and like nonsense words like kill and meat. That's about it.
Okay, so it's Hulk form. Got it.
Krynos form is like, I'm done messing with you, and then you're gonna die now. That's why Krynos form is really very rarely pulled into by other Garu, because the other thing about Krynos form is it immediately, any humans that are in range of Krynos form go into delirium, because this is their nightmare.
Yeah.
You don't have to. The delirium doesn't happen with the other 4 forms, but with Krynos it always does.
Okay, so humanity could be aware of like Glabros running around. Like, it's like, yeah, there's these really furry-faced dudes.
Yeah, you can rationalize this dude's just really hairy. And then with Hispo, like, this guy needs to shave or something. And with Hispo, you can be like, well, that's just a really big, scary wolf. But with Krynos, there's no getting around that. That's a werewolf.
Yeah.
Maybe the wolf's just closer than it appears.
Nope.
Okay.
So those are the forms. You'll be spending your time mostly in Hamid or Lupus form, occasionally going into Glabro and Hispo, and rarely going into Krynos when you're ready to screw things over.
Okay. So some of these tribes that we talked about earlier, like, I was actually getting really in tune with them. The whole, like, maybe all of this sucks, and if we just kill everything, we can hit reset. Can I just opt into that?
Opt into what?
I want to kill everything.
Just
You want to kill
all
everything?
humans. Doesn't that make the worm win? Wasn't that the whole thing?
Yeah, that was the whole thing. That was like,
Yeah.
don't do
Right.
that. That's not going to work.
Yeah. We tried that. It caused more
the Impergium,
problem.
that's what it's called. Yeah, we tried that. It caused the apocalypse. Don't do that.
Oops.
So there's a few other things we have to talk about. The first is there's renown, which is kind of like how it's similar to like the discipline tracker because they're related in a lot of ways to how you use gifts. So there are 3 types of renown, and you can gain renown either through story events or through spending experience points. So they form the basis of most of your gift pools. So like if you're using a gift, it would be like maybe your strength plus your renown. And there's 3 different types of renown. So there's glory, wisdom, and honor. And they're exclusive to different tribes. So if you pick a certain tribe, you're locked into that specific tribe's version of renown. So for instance, Silverfang's value honor, whereas someone like, someone like the Silent Striders would value wisdom, and something like the Shadow Lords would value glory. So so each tribe's spirit values one of those 3. And you pick, and when we get to gifts and rights, which we're getting to now, so gifts are like your powers that you get. And at the beginning, you pick 3. You pick a natural gift that it's just a free gift that you can consider these like origin feats. They're just a thing that you have access to as a werewolf. And then you have a tribe feat that you have to pick from a list of tribes. And then you have an auspice feat, an auspice gift. And those form the fundamentals of your gifts. And you use renown to fuel those gifts. And that's basically it. And rites are like rituals. Everybody gets 1 rite to start with. They're magical rituals or ceremonies that you can use to sort of call the spirits or change how you gain or lose rage, stuff like that. They're complicated. There's a lot of interesting stuff that goes in with that. Finally, let's talk about Hirano and Hoglosk, which is the werewolf equivalent of humanity in Vampire. So if you guys remember, humanity was like that downward spiral, like the more you lost, the easier it was to lose.
Really hard to get back.
It was really hard to get back.
I need to hang on to it for some reason because apparently it's important for keeping me in touch with this awful place.
Well, yeah, if you lose all of your humanity, you basically become an unplayable NPC character. So Hirano and Hoglosk are 2 separate tracks, and they can go up or down a little bit more easily than humanity does. But Hirano, anytime you suffer like a setback or a major failure, you add to the Hirano track. And if you ever get full on the Hirano track, you essentially just become depressed and nihilistic and abandon the cause. You're just like, there's no point in what I'm doing. I have fought. I can't fight anymore. What's the point? And you become so nihilistic and cynical about outlook that you lose your connection to Gaia, and you lose the ability to take on forms of the wolf anymore. You just become a regular person at that point. So that's essentially character death. Then we have Hoglosk, which is the opposite. I said like the more you break chronicle tenets, similar to like how humanity works, you have to roll a Hoglosk check, and if you ever fill the tracker, you submit to rage and anger and just become like a beast off a leash and have no moral compunctions about killing and any of that stuff. And you're essentially a monster under my control. And that's Werewolf.
Nice. Okay.
All right.
I want to build a werewolf.
Yeah.
Well, you should come and join us next time when we will build some characters for you guys.
Yes.
Hey, we did it in 1 hour and 15.
All right.
Oh.
Wait. Do we need to do the outro?
Maybe Randall's just say join us next time. I don't know.
All right, folks. Thanks so much for joining us for this RPGBOT. How to play Werewolf the Apocalypse. Ash just guided us through this. In the next installment of this series, we're going to go through character creation. We're going to learn how to build our very own werewolves. Cool.
If you don't go anywhere, you will not have moved.
Thank you, Confucius.
See you in a second, chat.